Hello, I am Jay Walker. I am the Agitated Ecoist. I am here today to talk about climate change, and this is part of the climate change series, and I'm here to talk about a bad system. Before I do that though, I'm just going to ask a couple questions and provide a little bit of background information. So my questions would be, is anyone concerned about the climate change we're experiencing today? Things we see on the news, that we hear on the radio, that we hear on the internet. And what about the short to medium term future? Are folks thinking about how climate change is going to affect that? And then the information. In a June 27th article in The Economist magazine, Munich Re, a large insurance company, calculated that the number of climate-related disasters has climbed by about 3 to 4 times over a baseline of the early to middle 1980s. This climate-related disasters includes things that we're seeing today, like the generational drought in California and that affecting much of Western North America, forest fires, floods such as we're seeing in Calgary, we've seen in Calgary recently, hurricanes, landslides, heat waves, large storms of every kind and description, and so on. If this trend continues that we've seen, we can expect that in 3 decades from now, climate-related disasters are going to be something like 10 to 15 times higher than they were against that same 1980s baseline. And about 6 decades from now, they'll be something like 30 to 60 times higher over that same 1980s baseline. I wonder how many of us think that sort of trend line is going to result in a sustainable and stable ecosystem for us and the creatures we share this planet with. I think that we're locked into a bad system right now, or we're virtually locked into a bad system, and we haven't really been willing to think about and take the actions necessary to change that system. Collectively, our narrative has been it's all about individual choice. If we drive smaller cars, smart cars, we take the bus a bit more, try to buy a smaller house, then maybe things will be better. But that's not really entirely true, because it's our system that provides most of our available choices for who we are and where we live. And our system has been one that's been derived from a belief that occurred about the same time as the Industrial Revolution. A belief in carbon fuels, a belief in individual transportation systems, a belief in low building efficiencies and technologies, and so on. It's a system that has many flaws right now. Yet without beginning to change this system, we're going to accrue these same bad effects further and further into the future. Changing the system also means having leaders who will try and develop and create that new system, who will cajole us and coax us and encourage us to act differently, to regulate things, to have some things flourish and others diminish. An example of our current system is embodied in our current leadership and our collective reliance on fossil fuels. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Stephen Harper, thinks it's a quote-unquote aspirational goal to try and be rid of fossil fuels by the year 2100, some 85 years from now. Well, Mr. Harper, I say it's unimaginative, it's uninspirational, and it's possibly even delusional to think we can continue to pour more and more greenhouse gases into our atmosphere for another 85 years without completely diminishing our chances of having a successful ecosystem. Mr. Harper has, however, continued to ignore this tough climate file, and it is a tough file, but he's ignored it in favor of his Hostess Twinkies program of income and pension splitting, child tax care benefit, and making fun of Justin Trudeau's hair. Mr. Harper thinks that those core constituencies he speaks to in those commercials that do those things, that talk about the pension and income splitting, the child tax care benefit, and teasing Mr. Trudeau about his age, an age I'd like to point out that was only 3 years younger than Mr. Harper was when he first became Prime Minister. But he thinks that his core constituencies will ignore the need for a sustainable ecosystem in 10, 20, and 30 years and vote for him. And vote for his Hostess Twinkies platform. Change is coming. It's coming for us all. of that we can be absolutely certain. We can try to influence it now by having the courage to vote differently, and perhaps even vote very differently than we have in the past. I myself have moved from one side of the spectrum to a completely different place where I consider environmental sustainability as the #1 reason and the #1 screen I screen my vote through. Perhaps some of you are moving in that direction as well. But if we don't, we can await change as climate-related disasters continue to increase in number, scope, and scale, and change will be forced upon each and every one of us. Mr. Harper has had nearly 10 years with this climate file, but he's ignored it in favor of junk food, the easy subjects, and teasing his opponents. I'm begging us all to look in the mirror, to gather up our collective courage on an individual basis, and to vote for someone who will begin the process of changing our systems, someone who will encourage, cajole, and coax us to begin changing and be willing to change. Please think about that when you step into the polling booth on October 19th. Stephen Harper is just not willing. #Harper just not willing. Thank you very much.